The Rivians kind of seem nice.
Which one?
The Rivians.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee for February 18, 2025. I'm Jamal Osman. I'm the chair of this committee. Before we begin the meeting, I want to remind all members, staff, and public that this meeting are broadcasted live to enable greater public participation. This broadcast includes real-time captioning as further method to increase the accessibility of our proceeding to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. We'll be using speaker management for this meeting, so please make sure you are signed in so you can participate in any discussions. At this time, I'll ask clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum.
Councilmember Rainville.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins.
Present.
Chowdhury.
Present.
Vice Chair Ellison.
Here.
Chair Osman.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Let the record reflect we have a quorum. Before we proceed to the public hearing items on our agenda, we'll first take our consent agenda, which items is 4 through 8. Item 4 is approving 1 gambling license. Item 5 is a passage of resolution accepting 2024 Metro Livable Community Grant Awards. Item 6 is approving rezoning ordinance for Larson Dental Clinic. Item 7 is amending the 2025 license fee schedule to include minimum fees for tow trucking services. Lastly, item 8 is authorizing multi-jurisdictional agreement with Hennepin County for Elevate Assistance Program. Are there any questions or discussions? Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Osman. Really exciting always to receive grants, especially these transit-oriented development grants. So I just want to celebrate the $500,000 that's being awarded for the Rise Up Center at 28th and Hennepin in Ward 7.
Thank you. See no one else. I will approve on the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. Now we will proceed to the public hearing of our agenda. First, we have a public hearing for the Administrative Enforcement Procedure Ordinance. This ordinance is fixing technical errors. I will have Jason Wittenberg from CBED to introduce that. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Title 1, Chapter 2 of the city's Code of Ordinances lists all of the titles within the city Code of Ordinances that are subject to the administrative hearing and enforcement processes. And inexplicably, the land subdivision and heritage preservation regulations are not listed there, and they should be. So this minor technical amendment corrects that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing. Are there anyone who would like to speak on this item? See none, I'll close the public hearing. And are there any questions or any discussions? Councilmember Allison.
Happy to move approval.
All right. With that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and motion carries. Next, we have a public hearing authorizing additional funding to the Native American Community Housing Project located at 1213 Franklin Avenue. I'll have Jamie Radel from CBED to give us that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Osman, and the rest of the Biz Committee. I'm Jamie Radel. I'm a Senior Project Coordinator with the Residential Finance Team of CPED. I'm before you today with 2 recommendations of approval for the NAC Housing Project. First is for preliminary and final approval of up to $22 million in housing revenue bonds. And the second is for approval of an additional $1 million from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contingency pool to support a total loan of up to $4,045,000 for the project. Located in Ventura Village, in the Ventura Village of Ward 6, NAC H is a component of the redevelopment of a former strip mall turned community health clinic at 1213 Franklin Avenue East. The proposed redevelopment is a mixed-use project that incorporates this housing use with an expansion of the Native American Community Clinic. The clinic and housing uses will have separate ownership and as such are being developed with separate funding programs. In 2024, the clinic use was before the City Council seeking a loan to assist with their project, and the City Council approved a $750,000 Great Streets loan for this use. The new building will be constructed on the existing surface parking lots adjacent to Franklin Avenue. The clinic will continue to operate in its existing space until such time it can relocate to its new facility on the first and second floor of the new building. The old building will then be demolished and the final site work completed. The 83-unit apartment project being developed by Wellington Management will be located on floors 2 through 6 of the building and will fully occupy floors 3 through 6. Residents of the apartments will have access to parking in an underground parking facility, as well as other property amenities such as a community room and outdoor amenity deck. The affordability mix in the housing will range from 30% of area median income, or AMI, to 60% AMI, and will include 3 types of rental assistance to support those living there. These include 16 project-based Section 8 units, 6 housing support units, and 11 Section 811 units. The 6 housing support units and 3 of the Section 8 units will be dedicated to households experiencing long-term homelessness, with Simpson Housing providing support services to those households that are filled through the Hennepin County Coordinated Entry System. The total development costs of the housing project are expected to be at or below $41.3 million and will be structured as a 4% low-income housing tax credit deal. The project has secured approximately 30% of project costs in soft debt and grants, including the Affordable Housing Trust Fund allocation from the city, deferred loans from Minnesota Housing and Hennepin County, grants from the Metropolitan Council and philanthropic sources as well, and a deferment of their development fee. The developer is expecting to defer approximately a third of their $3,075,000 development fee as part of the funding stack. The developer has applied for $22 million in housing revenue bonds from the city. This request will allow the developer to meet the 50% test required as part of the LIHTC program. If awarded the bonds, the project is expected to generate approximately $2 million in federal tax credits annually for 10 years, which when syndicated will generate approximately $18 million in equity for the project. The developer has also requested an additional $1 million of Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars through the program's contingency pool. The City Council awarded the project a total of $3,045,000 through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in 2023 and 2024. Due to increasing costs and pending sources that were not approved, the project continues to have an approximately $2 million funding gap despite value engineering. Due to time constraints of the project, which are being driven by the clinic's need to close on New Markets tax credits in mid-April, identifying and applying for additional sources at this time is infeasible. The developer has asked the City of Minneapolis and other governmental funding partners to fill this gap. Minnesota Housing has identified resources and is expected to bring forward a recommendation to fill approximately half the gap to its credit committee in March. The balance of the gap would be filled with the requested contingency pool award. The $1 million requested from the developer of the city represents $13,333 in additional trust funding for each of the 75 Affordable Housing Trust Fund eligible units, with the total Affordable Housing Trust Fund award of $53,822 per unit. The request is below the $15,000 City Council guideline per unit. The NAC housing project reflects 3 of the 7 key strategies outlined in the Way Home report. This includes Strategy 1, increasing housing supply diversity and affordability in all neighborhoods. Strategy 2, to produce more affordable rental housing and preserve subsidized rental housing for 30 years or more. And Strategy 6, prevent and end homelessness. Staff recommends approval of issuance of up to $22 million in housing revenue bonds and an additional $1 million to the project from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund contingency pool to support the NAC housing program. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Before we take any questions, I would like to proceed to open the public hearing and see if there's anyone who would like to speak. See none, I'll close the public hearing and just want to make a comment and say, this is really exciting project for much needed housing in this area. This has been a long time coming, and I want to thank the staff and Seabed housing team for their work on this project. I have met the developer and done the community engagement. Really super excited, and I can't wait this project to open or to start. So with that, I will move this this item forward for approval and recognize also here Councilmember Katie Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Osmond. I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and for outlining the city's goals that this project helps achieve, including ending homelessness and the other couple goals that you mentioned at the end there. So I think it's really important to have that that goal setting as we talk about these Affordable Housing Trust Fund awards. So thank you, and happy to support this today.
Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to also thank the staff for their hard work on this, and I want to mention Wellington Management. They're very tenacious in this. As you heard, the funding comes from so many different sources, and the funding is not yet complete. So Wellington is doing a great job holding in there and working with our staff. So I see the staff sitting over there. Thank you all. You all have your fingerprints on this. Thank you for your leadership over there, Alfred. Thank you.
Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really happy to be supporting this today. Just really wanted to center the great need in our local Indigenous community. We know that housing first practices are one of the best practices in order to provide stability for community members, especially community members struggling with homelessness, struggling with substance use disorder. And I think this is just a way that our city is really leaning in and making sure that this project happens. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to the local Indigenous leaders that are a part of this and our local Indigenous community for just consistently and persistently advocating on behalf of their community. It shouldn't have to be as hard as it is, but I wanted to give credit where credit's due, because it's decades and decades of advocacy that leads to a project like this happening and us being able to award this type of funding and having partnerships with a developer that's willing to do this work and partnerships across government. So I'm glad we're taking this step today.
Great. Seeing no one else, with the motion to approve this item, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. All right, our next item is a quasi-judicial rental dwelling license revocation for the owner of property at 1081 14th Avenue Southeast. I'll ask Nick M. from Regulatory Services to give us that presentation. Welcome, sir.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chair Osmond and committee members. My name is Nick Magrino. I'm the legal coordinator in Regulatory Services, and I'm here today to present the department's recommendation to revoke the rental license for the property at 1081 14th Avenue Southeast. This property is a rental duplex in the Como neighborhood. It's been owned by Britton Gates, the applicant and licensee, since 1989. In 2006, the license was updated to list him as the owner and contact person of record for the property. In 2024, the rental license fee was paid on March 4th, and shortly after that, as part of our regular rental license review inspection process, the housing inspector assigned to the property attempted to get in touch with the owner by phone, called him several times, did not hear back from him. And then at that point, the department sent an appointment letter to Mr. Gates at his listed rental contact address of 5700 Colfax Avenue South, listing an inspection date later in April, and Mr. Gates did not appear for the inspection. Then over the next 6 months, the department sent 5 more appointment letters. We did not hear from Mr. Gates. We weren't just sending those to an empty house. Mr. Gates did talk to the inspector on the phone and sent him some emails. At one point, they even worked out a mutually agreeable date to do the inspection, and Mr. Gates didn't appear for any of those. Starting in May, the inspector began issuing administrative citations for exterior violations at the property that he was able to observe. and about $4,500 in administrative citations and reinspection fees were added to the 2024 property taxes when those remained unpaid at the end of the year. There are additional fees for 2025 that are pending that have not yet been assessed, and the department did not get appeals for any of the administrative citations or reinspection fees. The 5700 Colfax Avenue South property listed as Mr. Gates' rental license contact address has actually been on the city's vacant building registration list since 2018. Just as some context there, the inspector believes, we haven't actually been able to verify this, but based on the inspector's visits to the property, he thinks that the upper unit is occupied by a tenant and that the lower unit is vacant. That's also based on the return mail that we've gotten from the tenant copies of the appointment letters that have gone out. So in December, the department issued a director's determination of noncompliance for the property, citing two licensing standards. Standard 8 requires that the owner or the agent require the department to be able to do a rental license review inspection, and licensing standard 15 requires that the licensee maintains a current, complete, and accurate rental dwelling application on file. That gave Mr. Gates 10 days to come into compliance with the rental license standards. We mailed that to both the official address on his application, the Colfax address, as well as an address in Wayzata that the department located online. We also posted the notice at the property. After that 10-day period passed, Mr. Gates still had not come into compliance, and so we issued the notice to recommend the revocation of Mr. Gates' rental dwelling license, give him 15 days to file an appeal of that notice, sent it to both the Colfax address and the Wayzata address. The Colfax address notice was returned by the post office as unclaimed, and the Wayzata one, post office let us know that that was claimed by an individual at the property in late December. And so at this point, we're past the appeal period, and he didn't file an appeal. If the council were to approve the recommendation to revoke the rental license after the action becomes official, we would administratively pick a vacate date. The tenant, if there is a tenant in the property, would be eligible for up to 3 months of renter relocation assistance, and we'd have someone from our department reach out to that tenant and work with them and try to help them find new housing. I'd also note Mr. Gates still could come into compliance up until the point at which this becomes official. So if you were to update the application and allow an inspection, that would take care of this administratively. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you might have at this point.
Thank you so much. I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing and have the questions maybe at the end. Is the license owner here to speak? Right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and recognize Councilmember Allison.
Thank you, and thank you for the update about us having options for the tenant, the potential tenant. I guess we don't know for sure. We never want to make sure that we're taking an action that's leaving somebody out on the street, but it sounds like we've got our internal mechanisms that can support that tenant should they have to vacate this property, and it seems like because of the non-response, they're probably gonna have to. One question I did have has there been any contact with who we assume is the upstairs tenant by our staff?
We have not. I know the inspector has knocked on the door. The notices that we've posted on the door have my desk phone number on them, and I haven't gotten any calls about it. There's a lot of different reasons that could be the case,
Sure.
so we'll just make sure that we reach out to them a few more times before anything becomes final.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And with that, I'm happy to move approval of staff's recommendation.
Okay. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. I do have another question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you had said that the landlord's mailing address is 5700 Colfax, but that has been empty since 2018?
Yep, that's correct.
So we recently passed an ordinance dealing with empty buildings. Would that building fall under that category?
That's correct, Councilmember Rainville. Since that property's been vacant since 2018, it would come under the prolonged vacancy enforcement new way that the department is approaching vacant buildings. So I'm not sure if it has yet. I think when the annual renewals come up, they're being reviewed by staff, and so whenever that anniversary date of when it was first entered into the vacant building registration comes up, they'd be issuing the $2,000 monthly citations. And that's unrelated to this action, but.
Right, unrelated, but yet it probably says a lot about the landlord. So I'm assuming then that this is on the radar for us to review at the appropriate time.
Yes, Councilmember, that is correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. See no one else on the queue with Councilmember Allison to follow the staff recommendation to revoke the license of the property 1081 14th Avenue Southeast. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. All right, now we will move to our discussion portion of our agenda. Item 9 is ratifying and updating the finding of the inclusionary zoning of the Unified Housing Policy. This item was continued from our last meeting, which we received the full presentations. Staff has also informed me that they are here to answer any questions. Councilmember Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go ahead. I know there still might be discussion, but I'm going to go ahead and move this item. I know that I think that we've all had the opportunity to meet with staff and get briefed on staff, as well as our contractor who's not able to be here today, but was here at the first meeting where we're running short on time. I know that I had great meetings with staff. I want to thank staff for the opportunity for us to talk about this kind of policy in depth. And I think it's the kind of thing that we really need as a council. We're dealing with really complicated issues in some instances, and often we can't learn everything we need to learn up on the dais. And so that was like a really great space for even myself, who's familiar with the policy, to get a lot of great insights into every question that I had. So thank you for that. But I'll go ahead and I'll move approval of this item. And if there's further discussion, great. And if not, then that's great too.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, and I will be voting for this as well, but I do. Thank you. I will be voting for this as well, but I do just have some concerns for our wonderful staff to think about, all these bright, eager minds out there. Right now, we're really not seeing a lot of rental housing being built in Minneapolis. We just approved some 30% AMI, but on the market rate side, there's literally nothing. It is being built in the suburbs, and it's being built in other cities. And I just sense that perhaps if we did have a limit, we suspended IZ for 3 or 4 years to prime the pump, so to speak, that might be an appropriate thing to do. I'm not proposing that today. I'm just throwing that out there to think about. But we're setting ourselves up for a rental housing crisis in the upcoming years with no future production going on at this time. So I just want, again, I look forward to talking to some of you, if not all of you, about this issue. But we're in a bad shape right now if you look 3, 4, 5 years out for our rental housing production. Thank you.
I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair. I had the same, concern around just lack of production of new housing supply in the city, and that's part of why I wanted to have that additional briefing with you all that Councilmember Ellison organized. And I really understand that the recommendation from you all as experts is to stay the course on IZ policy, and that pausing inclusionary zoning is not going to manifest a great supply or a large investment, and they haven't seen that in other cities that have done the pause. So going to lean into you all being the experts on this policy and trust your guidance here. And I'm also appreciative that the recommendation is to expand inclusionary zoning into student housing and to extend but phase out the exemption for smaller projects, which I think are both smart ways to make this policy more effective. Did you want to add something to either of our comments?
Yep, I see our staff, but I'll recognize Director Hansen first.
Chair Osmond, Council Members Cashman and Rainville. Yes, we're seeing some leading indicators that show that there's a slowdown in construction. However, we just passed over $1.8 billion in development activity in 2024. We're seeing some of those starts coming through the Planning Commission dwindle. We don't know exactly the extent to which the macroeconomic factors are having an effect on development in the city. We're doing some analysis right now. It is more than simply the inclusionary zoning requirements that are having an impact on people's decisions to build in Minneapolis or to that point anywhere in the United States right now.
Director, what do you want to add? Anything?
Good afternoon. Alfred Port, Director of Housing Policy and Development. Chair Osman, Councilmembers Rainville and Cashman. We would love to continue the conversation. I think to Councilmember Rainville's comment about there are new construction happening in other cities in the state. I'll also remind you, if not informed, that some of those, if not most of those units, are also receiving some form of some form of support from their cities or from the state. I'll also add that you all passed the ordinance, and the ordinance has a provision, a waiver provision. So if a developer wants to seek a waiver, they can reach out to staff and we can have those conversations. And if we deem that it appropriate for us to move forward with a recommendation to this body, we'll do so. But again, we'll welcome the conversations and we'll be ready if you so choose.
Thank you. Recognize Councilmember Chowdhury and then Councilmember Allison.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Port, for your comments, and Director Hanson as well, and the entire staff team and all of your work. I don't have any questions for you, just gratitude, and I would love to continue the conversation on IZ. I know that we're required in 5 years, at the very least, to come back and look at how IZ has been working in relationship to our housing market. So just really appreciative of the briefings that you gave us. I want to just take a quick moment to share that when I first started at the City of Minneapolis and was a new policy aide, one of the first policies that I had an opportunity to really get my hands on was our unified housing policy and inclusionary zoning. I was working then in the Ward 3 office, and I graduated from the University of Minnesota, so had really strong ties to the student population there. And we worked really, really hard in the Ward 3 office, not only on the inclusionary zoning policy and helping people in community understand the benefits of it after the Minneapolis 2040 had been passed, but also working really hand in hand with the student population at the University of Minnesota to make sure that inclusionary zoning would actually happen on the campus in areas where there's student housing. And that was not on the table when we were working on the policy. That was not something that was going to happen. And I'm really, really grateful to all of the students of the past and the students now that advocated to the office and the work that was done with staff to make sure that development on the student campus had affordable housing requirements. And just in general, kind of zooming out into the moment that we're in now, I love seeing these expansions and just growing that in that area. I think the University of Minnesota is actually a pretty good microcosm of our city in terms of looking at how different neighborhoods have different types of housing, where students at different income levels can afford, and then you just pan out to the rest of city of Minneapolis, and just deeply appreciate this expansion that we're doing to include options for 7% of units at 50% AMI. I am a huge supporter of inclusionary zoning. When I've attended the National League of Cities meeting in Washington, D.C., other cities have just like flocked to Minneapolis and said, wow, you did that. That is so amazing. We're trying to figure out how we're going to do it in our city. And it's just a dream to them. And I think with the passage of 2040 and then now 2040 being reinforced through state legislation, that's the land use that allows for the development to happen, right? Allows for the density to be created. But this is the real teeth that ensures that we're making sure that neighborhoods where there might not naturally be affordability for other income levels, that happens. And I think we need to continue to stay the course, because outside of the halls of city, of the Public Service Center, we're not at City Hall yet, the number one struggle that community members at all different income levels that are working class or middle class is housing, right? We're seeing the cost of living skyrocket and housing is a huge part of it, and there's a lot of national turmoil just over it. And so I think it serves us well to take these smaller steps in modifying our IZ policy. I personally had a conversation with the director and our staff about how we can go more robust, but I see this as a very practical step. And I'm looking forward to just kind of being a council member that joins you in tracking our progress and seeing the development that ends up happening in our city. I just think this is such a big thing that we have a privilege of building off of in the city of Minneapolis.
I want to say, on behalf of the housing team and the other staff across the enterprise, the folks, our colleagues in planning, the attorney's office, the consultant, for engaging in this process, because it was a heavy lift. And thanks for affording us the opportunity to come to you and brief you on what we were bringing forward. And I think we continue to stand by the recommendations that we're bringing forward, and I appreciate your support.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Elfric. This is good policymaking, and I know I already spoke, but I wanted to just kind of reiterate some of the points that you made, and maybe speak to my colleagues also a little bit about at least my opinion on like the tone we need to be taking when it comes to housing policy. We have excellent staff who have the subject matter expertise, who are, even against, my wishes, sometimes very cautious and deliberative, right? We need them to be that way. We need our staff to be cautious and deliberative about how they're thinking about housing policy. And I think that we need to be kind of dogged in how we push the envelope and are aggressive about providing affordable and dignified housing, right? The developers, their bottom line, that's their consideration. Like the law and the diligence and the facts, we lean on our staff heavily for that. But the aspiration of how we provide and ensure affordable and dignified housing, that's kind of like the line we need to be holding. And we need to be sensitive and receptive to the facts that our staff give us, which is what this recommendation is. And so I'm incredibly grateful. But I do think that we need to make sure that we're forward moving and aggressive. And so that's a big part of why I'm glad that we're not taking an overly cautious approach. I'm glad we're not dialing back regulation that we know for a fact will not result in more housing. And I hope that we can understand that when it comes to this build more strategy, we've done it. I've talked to elected officials from other countries or from other cities. I'm sure a lot of you guys have as well. We've done it better than anyone, pretty much, right? Building more, building fast, across the spectrum of housing. But at some point, the build more strategy, it has its ebbs and it has its flows. We're in an ebb right now, and we need to make sure that we're not flinching when it comes to sort of the regulatory part. We only really have a couple of tools that we in our toolbox as a council. We're a regulatory agency and we're a gap financer, and so we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to make sure that we are also regulating housing to the best of our ability. But IZ, and some of you guys were in the meeting where I said this during our briefings. But when it comes to affordability, you only get what you pay for, right? Every single dollar that goes towards affordability, it doesn't just magically manifest. It's usually us gap financing, the state gap financing, the county gap financing. As Councilmember Rainville said, it takes a lot of pools of money to make these projects work. With this IZ policy, we're getting affordability in some instances that we're asking our development partners to take on that responsibility with us, and we're not footing the bill on that entirely. And I think that's an incredible opportunity that this policy, and kind of only this policy, allows us. It allows everybody to say, we all got to put in a little bit, right? City's going to put in its gap financing. City and the county and the state and the federal government are going to put their money in. But developers are going to contribute to this community as well, and they're going to contribute to the solution to this problem as well. And I think it's really important for us to hold that line. So, when I hear us being a little bit apologetic about policy that we're drafting, or, we look at the facts and then we still sort of have this inclination that maybe we should dial this back, it worries me a little bit. And so I just want to offer my colleagues that perspective and say, stay aggressive, Staff will keep us in check. The community will advocate for itself. But on the council side, I think we need to stay aggressive on policy like this.
Thank you. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. So, thank you all. Forgot, there is a developer in my ward that has 184 units ready to go, but the IZ is stopping his financing on it. So I will have him contact you because he feels he can make it work should he get a waiver. And then, second of all, I'd like the clerk, if we could perhaps get a follow-up, how many units of housing that have been permitted in 2024, and distinguish between, if it's possible, between market rate and affordable housing?
Through the chair, Councilmember Rainville, the developer has reached out, and we're going to be working with him.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's getting the phone calls.
Thanks all.
All right, thank you so much. With that, Councilmember Allison's motion to move this item forward. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. All right, next, last item we have is receiving a presentation about a food vendor operation location options and regulations. This item was postponed at our last meeting. I welcome Amy Lingo from CBIT, from Business Licensing, and Cindy from Health Department. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, Chair Osmond, council members. It's so nice to be here today. I'm Cindy Weckworth. I'm the Director of Environmental Health in the Health Department. And as Chair Osmond mentioned, Amy Lingo will be co-presenting. She's the Manager of Licenses and Consumer Services. The information we're providing today is in response to a legislative directive on food vendor options and regulations, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So first question that we had is an overview of food vendor safety regulations, including but not limited to the role of the Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and the City of Minneapolis. And I, for one, really appreciate this question. Understanding the context of where the rules come from is really key to the conversation. To protect public health and address food safety on a national level, the U.S. Federal Drug Administration, known as the FDA, crafts a science-based model food code. The model food code language is incorporated into the state of Minnesota Food Code. There are 5 stated purposes of the food code: to safeguard public health and ensure that food is safe, unadulterated, and honestly presented when offered to the consumer; to reduce the risk of foodborne illness, thus protecting consumers and the industry from potentially devastating health consequences and financial losses. That might be from lost wages, doctors and hospital bills, or in the case of death, lost lifetime earning potential. Third is to maintain uniform standards for retail food safety that reduces the complexity and better ensures compliance. In other words, same rules all across the nation. What we do in Minnesota is the same as we do in other states. Eliminate redundant processes for establishing food safety and establish a more standardized approach to inspections and audits of food businesses. The CDC estimates that each year in the United States, there are 9.4 million episodes of foodborne illness, almost 56,000 hospitalizations, and 1,351 deaths. And hopefully you're getting a chuckle out of our norovirus guy here. Although if you've been sick, you're also like, yep, shaking your head going, I remember being there. The economic burden in the United States is estimated at $90.2 billion annually from foodborne illnesses. Globally, the World Health Organization indicates 60 million episodes of foodborne illness, 420,000 people that die from unsafe food, and of those, 125,000 are children. Surveillance from the CDC consistently identifies the top 5 major risk factors that contribute to foodborne illness. Poor personal hygiene, so people who are working who are sick, or people who aren't washing their hands. Improper time and temperature control, so cooking, reheating, hot and cold holding. Contaminated equipment or cross-contamination. Inadequate cooking, so they're not killing those bugs in that particular protein. And food obtained from unsafe sources, and this includes food made at home. So a little bit about our regulatory framework. Our authority at the city for food regulation, and that includes the food vendors, comes to the city through 2 delegation agreements, one with the Minnesota Department of Health and the other with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Under Minnesota Statute 145A, the state can delegate its authority for licensing, inspection, reporting, and enforcement duties to local agencies. The delegation agreement says that local ordinances must incorporate the requirements of statutes and rules for licensing, inspection, and enforcement. And we do this by adopting the state statutes and rules by reference. As stated in 145A, city ordinances may not conflict with or be less restrictive than the state rules or statutes. I pulled some of the more critical pieces out of the delegation agreement to bring before you. Under the risk-based inspection and uniform inspection program, it directs that the city will set reasonable fees to recoup costs, license businesses annually, conduct inspections, respond to complaints, and document follow-up activities. Maintain inspection reports that include at a minimum the following elements: identification of the safety violations, the corrective action, any enforcement action, follow-up activities, and complaint response, and then also do plan review for new construction or renovation. Also in the delegation agreement under compliance and enforcement, it states that the city will seek compliance by using enforcement tools specified in our ordinance and written in our policies and procedures, and that if initial enforcement fails to achieve compliance, we have other tools that we can use, such as seeking injunctions, referring the matter to the board's legal counsel to initiate criminal or administrative action, and pursuing other enforcement mechanisms, such as license revocation. And I just want to state for the record that we always believe that consultation and education come before enforcement. The city's programs are regularly evaluated by the respective state agencies to verify that the city is meeting the requirements of its delegation agreement. With the Minnesota Department of Health, we're in a continuous cycle. Every year we do 2 different standards. With the Minnesota Department of Health, we're reviewed every 5 years. We're actually in the midst of that evaluation right now. The evaluation does include a thorough, fine-tooth comb review of our ordinance language to make sure it doesn't conflict or is less restrictive than statute or rule. They review our policies to verify that we're following them as written. They review our standard operating procedures. They make sure we're hitting our required frequency of inspections based on risk. They make sure we are completing our plan reviews. They verify that we're following up with complaints, including foodborne illness complaints. They actually do a report review to look at how we describe our violations for clarity and verify that we give reasonable timeframes to fix them. They shadow and evaluate our staff in the field, and they verify that our staff have their required credentials, which is as a registered environmental health specialist. Some of you may recall that Minneapolis nearly lost its delegation agreement in 2013 when St. Paul lost theirs. We have built back better, and we work diligently on behalf of the city to make sure we meet all the requirements of the delegation agreement. This is a busy slide. I just put it up here so that you could see where the authority for delegation is in the MCO. This is an example of incorporating statute and rule. So 4626 is the Minnesota Food Code, and we're adopting it here by reference. So when you look at the city ordinance, it's almost silent when it comes to the food code. All of our rules and statutes, it's all, hey, look over there, it's over there at the state. And again, we also indicate that more restrictive standards apply. So this helpful table shows a breakdown of where authority lies, whether it's at the state or local hands. So it's more clear to see where we have the authority to change things and what we do not. As you can see, most of the things do fall under the state purview. The major requirements of the rules or statutes, again, are delegated to us, and we enforce those rules and statutes. So that includes plan review, the equipment specifications, so the requirement for commercial equipment that meets ANSI standards, the water supply, wastewater disposal, things like that. Food, beverage, and ice must come from an approved source. Food preparation and storage must be at a licensed business, a restaurant, or other commissary kitchen. Requirement for hand washing, requirement for dishwashing, and for food carts or trucks. If they don't have it on the cart, then again, that's done at the commissary kitchen. Required training. Almost all food businesses are required to have a certified food protection manager. Licensing required is in statute and rule. It's echoed in our ordinance. The type of food licenses and permits, I'll show you those as it has to do with vendors. Those also are defined in statute and rule and echoed in our ordinance. Time, place, and manner is mostly city, although the definitions do have some restrictions and limitations, and we'll see those too. The two things that are specific for city are locations allowed and fees charged. So the second question, overview of licenses and regulations for food vendors in the city of Minneapolis. And you probably all know that Minneapolis really is a food mecca. We have fantastic array of food, all kinds of great ethnic food, and it really does make Minneapolis a more interesting destination city. As we've indicated, our goal has always been to try and find a safe pathway that addresses food safety for vendors. Whoops. There are currently options for licensed food sales on streets or sidewalks and at events. So for licensed options on streets and sidewalks that currently exist is the mobile food vehicle or food truck. The self-contained, readily mobile. They can operate no more than 21 days annually in any one location. There are some options in zoning to allow that to be longer. And as with all of these options, again, there's the requirement for a licensed kitchen for food prep, unless it can all be done like on the on site or on the truck. Another type of food truck is a limited mobile food truck. Mostly we see these as ice cream trucks. So they can sell prepackaged foods. These are foods that are packaged by the manufacturer. Prepackaged items such as ice cream novelties in the package, soda in bottles and cans, candy bars, and bagged potato chips. And then there's the sidewalk food cart. It's required to be non-motorized and needs to be able to be moved by the self-propelled by the operator. And some of the foods that are approved for carts are pre-wrapped or prepackaged items. And then some of the same things as far as ice cream, soda, cans, everything that can be sold on a cart. At the limited truck. They can also do pre-cooked, ready-to-eat sausages, hot dogs, brats. So those are things that are cooked by the manufacturer and they're just reheating. and handed ice cream, hot and cold beverages, and then, we're always open to reviewing other options. The main thing is the cart needs to be able to support it. So if it's a hot holding item, the cart has to have hot holding, it has to have hand washing. If it's cold holding, it needs to have refrigeration. There are also options, 3 of them, for lower barrier options. In all these instances, the vendors do need to be invited by the event food sponsor or farmers market to participate in an event. Again, these are defined in Minnesota Statute 157 and echoed in our ordinance. And I should have mentioned that on the last slide as well. Short-term food permit vendor. They can sell at fairs, community celebrations, and other special events. They can operate no more than 10 days total in a calendar year. And again, that's part of that state definition. Seasonal food permit vendors have a food stand that can be disassembled and moved from location to location. They can sell at all the same special events as the short-term vendor, but they can also sell at farmers markets. And they can operate no more than 21 days annually at any one location, again, from state statute. The biggest difference between short-term and seasonal is the number of days, the requirement for a CFPM, which is the Certified Food Protection Manager, and some of the equipment requirements. And then there's one kind of special category under Minnesota Statute 28A. There's a cottage food vendor. This is the only category that does allow you to make food at home and sell it from home. It's the least expensive to sign up for. A cottage food vendor must be registered with the Minnesota Department of Ag. They can sell non-potentially hazardous baked goods like cookies and cakes and bread and things like that, and then also pickled and canned goods. So things that are shelf-stable. Last year, we permitted 339 events, 199 seasonal vendors, and 343 short-term vendors. So all popular options. I just am throwing these up because they're our local ordinance pieces of interest as far as addressing sales on sidewalks and sales in the street that they're prohibited, and then also the echo of a license being required. So the third question, overview of outreach and engagement efforts for potential food vendors. By Minnesota Food Code and city ordinance, there are certain steps a person must follow to be licensed and sell food in the city. In 2023 and 2024, Minneapolis health and business licensing inspectors worked to educate unlicensed vendors on licensing requirements, licensing options, food safety requirements, and the safest places to sell food. We took a trauma-informed approach. We worked with SUNY to try and make sure that we were meeting people where they are. The outreach was in English and in Spanish, depending on what the need was, and it was both verbally and in writing. We made sure that we included information for contact information for the Latino Economic Development Center because of a grant that we had. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. It also had referrals for food, housing, health care, and labor rights. And we also made referrals to CPED Small Business Team. We were available weekly at Career Force during their food shelf hours to educate prospective vendors and make referrals to LADC, Small Business Team, or business licensing. Health worked with community organizations to host classes about food safety and licensing requirements. This included at the church, at food shelves, in addition to the one I already mentioned, with LADC and at Waite House. Last cycle, the Minnesota Immigration Movement mentioned that we did a collaborative certified food manager class with MIM at Waite House. I mentioned the CFPM is required for most food businesses. Health hosted 2 pre-CFPM voluntary study sessions to go over food safety concepts and to run through a number of sample questions. For the class, we hired a Spanish-speaking food safety consultant who is a certified trainer. We purchased the class books, and we bought lunch. So, and I should mention, we handed out over 200 flyers in Spanish inviting people to that class. Health received a $20,000 grant to help vendors purchase equipment to lower the cost barrier to legally sell food. Health contracted with LEDC, a trusted community partner, to lead the outreach to help prospective vendors to develop business plans, pay for the cost of licenses or permits, and purchase equipment. We also helped with the Latino Farmers Market. LEDC was the organizer. Small business team paid for the vendor permits and provided technical assistance. Health supported vendors by assisting in filling out the seasonal food permit application, providing hand washing stations, so both the water container and soap and paper towels, and we gifted them thermometers. We provided technical assistance. I was there personally to help set up and plug in and haul around refrigerators and haul water and things like that to help get that set up. It was a great event. I believe it was Councilmember Chavez's idea. We have a number of free trainings that are online. We have the food handler training available in multiple languages. We have allergen training that's available in English and Spanish. We have event food safety training in English and Spanish. We have a link to the state website where people can go to get their Certified Food Protection Manager classes. And then we have many, many fact sheets, videos, and food aids in multiple languages. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amy Lingo, the Manager of Licenses and Consumer Services.
Good afternoon, Chair Osborne and committee members. I'm Amy Lingo, Manager for Business Licensing, and I'll take you through the rest of the presentation. So question 4, a map detailing the locations where permitted food vendors may currently operate. The map shown here is the current approved food truck area map. There are several key components to this map. Most of the city is an approved operating area, which means it's approved for day-to-day use, as well as events, farmers markets, and private catering. Vending at breweries and distilleries fall under the day-to-day category, as would any, find a place to park and sell would for lunchtime. Downtown, which is denoted by yellow, also has the additional option of bus lanes. There are certain bus lanes where you can pull an obstruction permit that would allow you to operate in that location from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's also markings around the regional sports facilities because they do have barriers as well. The red zones are areas that are not opened currently for day-to-day use. Those areas are still open for food trucks to operate private catering, farmers markets, and public permitted events. Food trucks are not allowed to operate within 100 feet of a restaurant or sidewalk cafe on the same block face. So we don't count across the street, it's on the same block face. Without written permission, nor are they permitted within 200 feet of park board property, again, without permission. The park board has a permitting process for food vendors to sell at certain locations. This map shows the approved sidewalk food cart area. Downtown is in green, and then the blue lines, which you can probably see better on your own paper, denote commercial corridors. Sidewalk food carts may request a site in these areas. Sites must be ADA compliant and are improved with conjunction with Public Works. Sidewalk food carts are also not permitted to operate within 100 feet of a restaurant or sidewalk cafe on the same block face without written permission, nor are they permitted within 500 feet of a park board building without permission. The stars on the map denote licensed sidewalk food cart locations. So those are the areas that sidewalk food carts are currently licensed to be. Question number 5, options for expanding the number of locations for permitted food vendors via a new ordinance. Amending the ordinance will allow for sidewalk food carts to apply for locations along community corridors, which is marked in purple. So right now it's just commercial corridors. One option would be to add community corridors, which you could see really decentralizes and widens out that area. The food truck map is set in policy, and the remaining areas can be opened for day-to-day activity by administrative action. The late-night food truck zone also is a tool that we have in our toolbox in the ordinance, and that can be established via administrative action. The successful late-night food truck zone pilot was ran prior to 2020, and the conversation to restart it in the Northrop area has recently begun. This only changes permitted hours of operation, which is currently from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So it will allow them to operate in the same regulated manner, but later. Food cannot be changed, but there is room to increase time and place options in the licensing portion of the ordinance. Question 6, options for an equitable fee system, including a subsidy program to make it affordable and waiving first-year fees. This could include a fee study that is comparable to other municipalities. So the current fee structure, fees are set at a cost recovery model. Food trucks are licensed at 1 truck per license. Sidewalk food carts are licensed at 1 location per license. We do have a nonprofit food truck license fee, which is $63 each in the fee structure. So they still have to meet all the criteria as a food truck license, but if they are a registered nonprofit who's been existed for 3 years, they can qualify for that lower rate. There is a price reduction model already in existence for sidewalk food carts. Full price for 1 location, additional locations are half off. For example, 1 licensed location is $719. If you added in a second location, that makes them $360 each. It's like a buy one, get one free. Any subsequent licensed locations are at that discounted $360 rate. License fees for both food trucks and sidewalk food carts were lowered in 2025 per request of the Health Department of Business Licensing in order to mirror the small restaurant fee. In 2024, the fees were $865 for a food truck, $940 for sidewalk food carts. Going forward, they are $719 each. An option to explore for sidewalk food cart license fees are the nonprofit fee structure that we have for food carts. Might be a good option to look into that. Equipment and operational standards will still apply. All fee studies are completed by the budget office. Fee studies would look at the cost of the licenses based on the cost recovery model, taking into account the licensing process, the health permitting process, and also includes enforcement action. The multi-cart discount could also be studied in that program. Question 7. The options for accessibility and access of the licensing process to everyone, regardless of immigration status and language barriers. Consistent with existing City of Minneapolis and State of Minnesota licensing and regulatory requirements. Applications are currently available in Spanish and English in food truck, sidewalk food cart, special event, and seasonal food. Applications can be translated into many languages upon request using the city language services. Business licensing and health have the following language speakers on staff: Spanish, Somali, Hmong, Thai, Chinese, Oromo, and Amharic. Application requirements are set so we can assist in finding the correct license type and help the business meet the regulations of that use type. Basically, we ask who, what, where, when, and how. Who are you? How can we get a hold of you? What are you selling? Where do you want to sell it? Where are you preparing the food? Where is the equipment stored? When? What time do you want to sell these items? And where? We did that. And how? How are you preparing the food? What sort of equipment are you using to prepare the food? Question 8. This is the big one. Information on and breakdown of fines and citations issued to unlicensed food vendors in 2023, 2024. I will review each of these by section. A is information on the standard operating procedures in issuing these licenses, or these citations. Business licensing and health were tasked to follow up on complaints. We are education first and start all interactions with the goal of educating and gaining compliance, with the focus on being public and vendor safety. The first contacts were outreach and engagement. The internal policy was set for a minimum of 3, but quite often 4 to 5 touches prior to issuing a citation. Citations were mailed or hand-delivered. In 2024, any that were hand-delivered were due to the fact that they were returned to our office as undeliverable, and they were carried by the inspector just in case they encountered the vendor again when out on a subsequent complaint. Citations may double with each incident within a 24-month period, and this is standard protocol for any and all citations issued within business licensing. This map shows the locations of the 2024 unlicensed vendor complaints. As you can see, it was an issue all throughout the city. So the total number of citations issued from January 1, 2023 to December 31st, 2024, there were 42 enforcement letters, 37 citations, and 5 violations. This is the formal code enforcement letters. This is not any of the educational touches where we handed out flyers. This is just the formal assigned to a person enforcement letters. There were $16,000 in fines that were assessed. The cost of the individual fine and citation issued. This chart here shows the breakdown of each citation and its cost. As you can see, most were within the $200 range. There was one that got to the $2,000, which is the max that any citation that we issue can be given. You will see some repeat numbers, because in that instance, they were citations that kind of follow the chain. In some instances, we did a new case number for each citation. Sometimes if it was the same person, we would follow the chain through. So you might see some repeat numbers. D, the neighborhood where each fine and citation were issued. 10 in Downtown West, 5 in Central, 2 in Jordan, 1 in North Loop, 17 in Powderhorn Park, and 3 in Standish. The 3 in Standish is actually like at the intersection of 3 neighborhoods, so we just kind of picked one of the random corners because they were right in the middle. Slide E, the department that physically issued the citation, Health and Business Licensing issued the citations, most of which, especially in 2024, were written by the Business Licensing Inspector for operating without a license. Okay. Business Licensing and the Health Department work closely together to educate and to ensure the safety of those who sell and consume food in the city of Minneapolis. Thank you, and we stand for any questions.
Right. Thank you so much for that presentation. I am pulling my computer here. Yes, I do want to make a comment and say, first of all, that it was really detailed presentation. I learned so much just to listening to that, the structure and the process and the state role and the city role. I know we have a very less role looking at this presentation, but you made it more available information for us to study and to assess this. And really did a good job connecting with the community and being out there and having them collaborating with them and giving us some of the suggestions. So I really want to thank the staff. I know your intention, your willingness is to keep everyone safe and healthy, at the same time making sure that we're serving everyone regardless of what. And the things that I'm seeing, the application process being available in different language, it's very positive. And also regardless of the immigration status, the application will be processed. So just want to leave it there and just want to thank you and your work, and really super excited to be seeing this and how we can do it. Maybe one question I'll throw out there before I called Councilmember Chowdhury is that you mentioned the citation, and also at the beginning of the presentation, you did mention that the park board has their own process too. Do we know if the park board also issue a citation?
Chair Osman, I am not aware if the park board has issued citations or not, but we can look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you so much, Chair Osman. Thank you so much to our staff for working on this presentation, and then also meeting with me and Councilmember Chavez and our team pretty regularly. Thank you so much for fulfilling this legislative directive. I know that there was a lot of detailed asks within it, but this has been very, very helpful for me, just like getting this presentation and thinking about the conversations we need to have next and moving through the policymaking process. First and foremost, I kind of just want to note that just looking at both the citations and the places where we have unlicensed food vendors who are largely a part of our immigrant community, it's clear that the way that licensing is set up and the way that we have offerings as a city isn't working to help bring people into compliance, right? The issue persists, and personally, on my end of things, I want community members who are trying to be entrepreneurs, who are trying to make a living, be successful in that and want to help bring them to compliance. And at the same time, we don't want people to be standing on busy highway areas and being in a path of danger or having to get multiple citations over and over again that we know that they cannot pay, and also experiencing the psychological trauma of even having like a council member or someone that looks more professional come up to them and be scared, right? Especially with the relationship our undocumented community and immigrant community has with ICE. I think if we stay at the status quo currently, we're going to continue to see every summer these food vendors at different locations. They're going to be selling, people are going to be buying, but we're going to see concerns about food quality and foodborne illness. We're going to see concerns about their safety and well-being. We're going to hear concerns from them about citations or interactions that they're having with government. And so there's just a deep need in this moment for us to come together, both through this licensing portion of it, but looking at the issue holistically, on partnering both as a city, considering the requirements we have devolved upon us by the state, and then working with the park board. I see a familiar face from the park board in our audience, and I'm just very appreciative for you to come today to our chambers. I think that's a piece of the puzzle I think we need to tool out. I do have a couple questions, but one thing I just wanted to note is currently the licenses that we have set forth, it doesn't quite fit the need for these food vendors, right? 21 days at a time, one location, that's currently not working. Cultural competency is something that we need to learn and grow at in the city of Minneapolis, and I think Minnesota Immigrant Movement has been very helpful in being that bridge, and I really encourage my colleagues to go back and look at the presentation that they gave. Just sharing that insight, because really great that we have Spanish speakers available at the city of Minneapolis, but actually Spanish isn't even the first language of some of these food vendors, right? There's specific indigenous languages, and Spanish is even difficult for them. And then again, there's just different things we need to tool out in terms of partnership with local government. The first question that I had is specific to allowing future foods to be qualified and what that process would be. My question is, how do we allow more cultural foods that we're seeing vendors selling once they come into compliance? And that's our goal, bringing them to compliance, helping them get a license, like tacos, empanadas, the fruit juices that they sell, the other things that the health department and licensing has seen. What does the process for that look like?
Thank you for that question through the chair. I forgot to mention something really important earlier, and that's that the $150,000 that was earmarked for this particular effort, the RFP was released last week. And that, I think, is going to be really helpful. The main piece of that, we did unfortunately find, we asked a couple times, we can't purchase equipment with that money because it's general fund money, so it doesn't meet the public purpose. But it addresses many of the things that you have addressed as far as the cultural competency, making sure that they're, instead of inspectors coming out, that there are trusted community groups that are going out and meeting them where they are on the street. That's part of the RFP, is that they do outreach to vendors and invite them to come in to their process and provide training, help them get their CFPM, help them figure out what their menu can be and what equipment they need, help them go through the plan review process. So the RFP is very much kind of a shepherding, hand-holding to be able to accomplish that. So we're really excited about that piece. And then as far as specific foods, currently, I mentioned we had over 339 events, and now I can't remember without my notes in front of me, 199 seasonal and maybe 300 or 400 short-term. Those are all vendors who are offering food across the spectrum. Those are great ways for people to kind of test out what sells and what customers are interested in. I can't remember if in an earlier meeting, if it was Councilmember Cashman or if it was you, Councilmember Chowdhury, who suggested that maybe similar to what we do with our food trucks, that we post all of the licensed vendors on our webpage, and we do that for the seasonals, so that if there are event sponsors who are looking for vendors, they can go there and try and find people who are offering the sorts of food they're looking for. So we're trying to help them be more visible also if they're licensed.
Yeah, and so thank you so much for that. For these different food types, would the vendors have to just come to the city of Minneapolis and kind of walk through the foods that they would like to sell, and for those to be sellable? I know that that was mentioned in the slide. Is that? Yeah.
Yes, they could. We would look at what the food item is, make sure that they have a commissary kitchen where they can make the food, make sure that whatever cart, depending on how they're licensed, there are different equipment requirements. So we would look at how they, what is within their wheelhouse as far as how they're inspected or not inspected, permitted, and then help them figure out how they could do that with the equipment they have. And sometimes it means they're limiting their menu to one item, like a hot-held item, as opposed to, 3 or 4 different dishes. So we, part of the concern is how many times the food goes through what's called the food danger zone. So from 40 degrees to 140 degrees essentially is the food danger zone. And right now, that is one of the major concerns, is a lot of the food that's being held is at about 70 degrees. Mm-hmm. And so that's a time when food is going to rapidly and exponentially multiply bacteria.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And on the commissary kitchen part of it, that's really, really key in making sure that food is prepared safely. And one thing that we're discussing, and I think the $150,000 that Councilmember Chavez and I brought forward can help with, is building community partnerships so commissary kitchens and that type of activity preparation can take place there. But I wanted to ask, on the city end, is there some sort of help that the city administration and staff could do in identifying potential commissary kitchens to work with who we contract with and make it just easier for food vendors to have that preparation spot? Because the thing that I'm thinking about is there's just already so many barriers, right? You have the application, you have to get the right equipment, you have to have someone speaking to you in the right language, and then it's like you have to have a place where you can prepare. So the more we can limit or reduce the barriers, I think the smoother this is going to go. So the question is, can the city kind of help us identify some of those commissary kitchens that we can try to look for partnership in?
There are some known commissary kitchens that do rent out their space. There are some churches and other religious buildings where they also rent out their space. Any licensed commercial business, like a restaurant, can be a commissary kitchen if it works for them to have storage and prep. Like if there's a place that's a breakfast place, they could rent it out in the afternoon for prep, so there are lots of different models out there.
Yeah, I'll plan on following up with you all and just discussing that, because I think renting's great, but obviously finances are already barrier, like, right, in terms of equipment. So if there's places where we can find different partnership. And then the last question I'll ask, and I know that Councilmember Osmond is in queue as well. I do think we need to figure out proactively how to find the partnership with our Parks Board. This question about the type of license that they have, I know that they rely on the City of Minneapolis Public Health Department to make sure everything's in compliance. And there's been a discussion that we've had once we started talking about this licensing issue, is having locations that are city, but also having discussions with the park board about locations within their parks, because that's where we're seeing a lot of the different food vending. Powderhorn Park in Ward 9 for Chavez, and then for me, a lot of people are enjoying what's being served at Minnehaha Falls Park. And so I just wanted to see if you had any additional contexts or next steps on connecting with the Parks Board and kind of tooling out our processes.
Yes, and I haven't looked. Oh, yep. Yes, our friends from the Park Board are here. We've talked about after this conversation and some direction that we know that we want to start meeting regularly to have a kind of a plan of action and be able to make sure that we're working lockstep with the Park Board and able to look for locations or look for other sites that might be an option.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you're right in that the food industry it's not a low barrier. It is expensive. Working in a restaurant is more of a low barrier, and there's a great opportunity for learning in a restaurant in the back of the kitchen. But you're right. Equipment is expensive. Renting is expensive. It's not as low barrier as one might think.
All right. I will recognize Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you. I don't think I have too many questions, but I did want to thank you for the presentation, and maybe like I saw that we've got some recommendations about things that could be done, but as you know, there's always a lot of things that could be done hypothetically, but like what will get done given the timeline, the capacity, the expertise that we have in the room, it can be a different sort of answer, it can be a different kind of question. I would love to see, especially with all the community engagement and relationship building that's been started and done, I'd really love to see that continued. I think that there are so many different questions that can come up, both, sometimes we on the council think that we're articulating a problem that we're seeing in the community really clearly, and staff are sitting there being like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, I maybe know what the words mean, but like, how do we make that real out in the community? And the solutions to those questions or those problems can really be hashed out, I think, when we're like just in meetings, right? Like in those regular partnership meetings. And so, I don't know what kind of capacity or what kind of support staff would maybe need. Maybe that's a question in order to move forward with maybe a work group type of situation where the council members who are, I'm not one of the authors here, but the council members who have been most interested in this policy, the community members who you guys have already started to build with, the parks, our staff can maybe come together and start to figure out, okay, where can we make the pieces fit? Because I could also see this like, okay, well, we're changing the code, then folks don't necessarily know the rules, they weren't a part of crafting them. I could see this game of telephone starting to kind of like maybe never coalescing, and would love to know staff's perspective on how we could get all the pieces to coalesce.
Welcome, CEO.
Good afternoon, committee members, Chair Osmond, Vice Chair Ellison. Good news, I think a lot of that's happening right now. So I should introduce myself, Brett Shelley, Deputy City Operations Officer, Development, Health, and Livability. Certainly, since I've been in this role since April, CPED, Health Department, Regulatory Services all report to me, so it is a good match. And I've been out and listened to the stories of the vendors through the work of MIM. Felt like it built a good relationship with Jovita also working very closely with Councilmember Chavez and Councilmember Chowdhury. We have meetings every couple of weeks and checking in. So this was all part of kind of laying out a bit of a process to lay out the regulatory framework we're working in, but also bring some ideas about the ordinance changes, which have already been introduced, and that work is happening. So
yeah, absolutely. And I even think of some of the things that maybe need to get done. For instance, there's equipment that we can't purchase because it doesn't meet public purpose, but if that's equipment they need, then like how do we make sure we streamline that information to them so that they can begin fundraising for that? Or if there are kitchens that we could, not that just that we know about, but if there's an opportunity for us to maybe build a relationship and have a pilot or something for, that get them getting from a commissary kitchen into their products, like those are the kinds of ideas that I think can really get hammered out in those kinds of work sessions. And so I'm glad that work's already beginning. And if people are a part of crafting the policy change that affects them the most, it just, in my mind, it makes compliance so much more likely. And so that's why I think it's it's good that we're engaging with MIM and Hovita and some of those groups. So that's all I got.
All right, wonderful. Again, thank you so much, Steph, for that great presentation. Seeing no one else on queue, I will ask clerk to receive and file this item. All right, seeing no further business before us, with no objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.